The Compliance Life details the journey to and in the role of a Chief Compliance Officer. How does one come to sit in the CCO chair? What are some of the skills a CCO needs to successfully navigate the compliance waters in any company? What are some of the top challenges CCOs have faced, and how did they meet them? These questions and many others will be explored in this new podcast series. The Compliance Life is hosted by Tom Fox, and each month he'll present the story of one CCO through 4 episodes. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back again for another series on The Compliance Life. Today, I am visiting with John Melican. John is with Exiger, and he has traveled to and from the CCO chair. So, John, first of all, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to visit with me over this 4-week podcast series.
Great to be with you, and long-time listener, first-time participant.
Well, great. I was wondering, John, if we could start with your academic career and your early professional life. Could you tell us where you went to law school and why?
So just before law school, I went to Colgate University and was graduated from there and went on to Albany Law School. The reasons to go to Albany were numerous, including financial and proximity to the city, but predominantly I knew I wanted to do something with criminal law, and there was a professor there for a long time named Peter Preiser, who was the guru of New York State criminal procedure, and the opportunity to go learn from him seemed a good gateway to getting into a career in criminal law in New York. So that's how I ended up at Albany Law School.
John, did you always have being a lawyer kind of at the front of a professional mind, or was that something that you just sort of more meandered into?
That's why I mentioned Colgate at the beginning, that the strengths of a liberal arts education are that you get to meander into a lot of different things. I mean, I went from an undergraduate degree in history, where, I studied a wide range of topics, but, at the same time, with a small liberal arts school, I was taking physics and music theory classes. It was really all over the place. So by the time I got to senior year, it was equal parts of I need to find a real job, or I need to do something to delay the inevitable. So law school seemed like a really good idea to delay the inevitable. And, I did a little bit of research, not a whole lot of effort went into it, but I knew that I wanted to do something in the public sector, and, criminal law always seemed fascinating. It seemed like a good opportunity. And I knew at some point, if I was going to do it, I wanted to do some kind of trial work, something where you had to get up and stand up in front of people and make an argument. And that's really the impetus for going to law school. I wish there was some better story to it, but it was mostly the same decision everybody makes. You kind of go with what feels good at the time and kind of what's accessible at the time.
Well, my undergraduate degree was in Central European history, French Revolution to the present, and at that time the present was 1978. So with that very fellow historian and with that degree, I became a cook in Austin. It was all I was qualified to do. But if you're interested in the greater kingdom of Bohemia circa 1800, I'm your guy.
If you ever want to take If you ever want to take a tour of the Zinoviev letter of 1924, I'm your guy. I am the only guy interested in that topic, but that was my thesis.
So what was your first job out of law school, John?
Right out of law school, I went to the Manhattan DA's office, and I say that with some reverence to the office. It is you can talk to any number of people who may have held a position as an assistant DA at a number of places. But Manhattan is pretty special, and it pretty much is the single greatest job I think you can get coming out of school. I would have paid them to do it. It was a tremendous amount of fun. They throw you right into work. Your first day on the job, there's some form of orientation, and this is back in 1992. There's some form of orientation, but not really. They just send you out there and put you in a courtroom and start throwing papers at you, and judges start yelling at you, and court officers start yelling at you, and defense attorneys start yelling at you, and you just learn by doing. And it was an entirely different skill set than I thought it would be, but it was great for learning on the job, learning how to play defense, kind of all day, every day, trying to play catch up where you're always behind in what you're doing, but you've always got something to do and you've got to perform. It had so many life lessons baked into it. It was fantastic. The subject matter was really, really interesting. You start out in the trial division, at least I did. So you're starting out with people jumping the turnstile, possession of marijuana, now not technically illegal in New York State anymore. But you start out with very low-level crimes, but they mix in there enough of the domestic violence misdemeanors, which are incredibly serious and incredibly terrifying to handle, because you have a lot of responsibility at a very young age with, sometimes very little talent or experience under your belt, but a lot of support. Really great experience to work with people, victims of crimes. You get close to some people. You learn a lot about human nature. You learn about relating to a lot of different people from all different walks of life, and you do it both in the courtroom, talking to the important people in the courtroom, including sometimes even jurors. It just was incredibly expansive to a kid who was essentially from the suburbs. You just learned a tremendous amount, even in those first couple of years in the office. After doing that for a number of years in the trial division, I went over to what was called the investigations division. You start out prosecuting small white collar crimes, embezzlements, sort of white collar thefts of every form and function. A couple things like stolen car rings, where you have to do search warrants, and you get your skill set kind of ramped up a little bit in writing warrants and applying for things like pen registers. There are some weird applications that you have to make. You work very closely then with the detectives. Your victims are mostly corporations or corporate functions, sometimes law firms. It really showed you that there's a huge intersection between the law and business. And then following that, I went into what's called the Frauds Bureau, where you handle long-term investigations into essentially white-collar crimes. And there's a great history of that office, doing some really fantastic work from cases like BCCI. I think there was some aspects of the Tyco cases that were brought there. I'm forgetting hundreds of others that were done there. I ended up working on a case called LCP Capital, which was a broker-dealer case where there was manipulated securities, and it really brought me into focus for the rest of my career, in banking and AML.
John, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I hope our listeners will join us in our next episode where we talk about your move into the corporate world. John, I wondered if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself or any of the topics we've talked about today. Where could they go?
Just Exiger.com. It's probably the best place, and you can see everybody who's there and the services we have to offer.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Compliance Life. I hope you will join me again next week, where I take up another episode in The Compliance Life. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. If you would like to be featured on The Compliance Life, please give me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, if you like this series, please give us a rating on iTunes. Any review and rating would definitely help get the word out about the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks again.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.